Thanks. You also forgot the part where I said that my dog is a CSPO.
Okay.
That's a very important detail. Oh, okay. Yeah. People would have laughed at that or been incredibly upset. I'm not sure. So, how this was going to go down was I was supposed to do a tutorial day with Mike Sutton, who you know from last night, where we taught people how to go into their organization and fuck shit up, basically. That was kind of the idea, and how to do it effectively and for positive change. But I think only 2 people signed up for that tutorial. Why not? What's wrong with you? It would have been awesome. So it got canceled, and then I got a frantic email, I guess a few days later, from the organizers, and they said, hey, would you mind doing a keynote? This is about 3 weeks ago, and I said, I have nothing to talk about. Absolutely nothing to talk about. I'm not an Agile coach. I'm not a trainer. I'm not a tester. I write tests, but I'm not a tester. I didn't know how that works, but I do. And so I said, you know, I don't really have anything to talk about. I could probably talk about what I've been doing for the last year. And I wrote this little crappy blurb about what I was doing in the last year that made no sense at all. But they accepted it. So here's how it's going to work. I had nothing prepared. I still have nothing prepared. I'm going to basically improvise the whole thing. These are my notes, so you'll notice that I might be looking at them occasionally, but that's just how it has to be. I'm Agile. We do things on paper, right? Okay. So yeah, that was the thing about Mike. And so I have to ask, what were the organizers thinking? They know nothing about me, obviously, right? They had to find out a little about me from a blurb. I do have a dog, yeah.
We know you have a dog.
That's about it. That's all you know. I could be a homeless person off the street. I am a homeless person off the street. See, you didn't vet. So, like Mike yesterday, he said he was going to provoke. I tend to do that as well, but I actually try to piss people off on purpose. I really try to get people outside of their comfort zone because I think your comfort zone is the worst possible place that you can be. Totally. Because what it does is it just puts you in a place where you're unwilling to listen, unwilling to change, unwilling to deviate from anything that you've ever done in your life because you're afraid, right? Fear drives us horribly, and I'll talk a little bit about fear. Yeah, so I'm going to piss you off today. I might be a little too honest at times about things personally. If you're uncomfortable with that, I'm sorry. Also, I'm from Boston. What that means is I swear a lot. Way more than that guy. I swear, like, every sentence you're going to hear either fuck, shit, ass, or something coming out of my mouth. Maybe multiple times. There's a saying in Boston, it's fuck you, you fucking fuck. That is how I speak normally.
But is it tasteful?
Of course. Yeah, sure. I drink my coffee with my pinky out. It's totally graceful and tasteful. Yeah. Oh, my screensaver's on. Hold on. Yeah, I haven't even gotten into the slides yet. I have to type my password in. Sorry. Can you see? Man, yeah. So hold on. You really don't need to see the slides because there's crap. But let's try something here. Mirroring. I'm using Linux, I apologize. That's the problem. Okay, here we go, good. And then also Chrome is not the nicest thing to use when it comes to things like full screen. Oh. Yeah, thank you. Hold on. Your internet here sucks, so I'm just going to do this instead.
That's not true.
No, it is true, though. Come on. One thing that I know is that you should never lie about anything. So here's what I'm going to do. The slides are stupid. I'm just going to go by paper, unless somebody can fix my internet. What? Why is it really that? Yeah, it's pretty bright. Good point. Then it doesn't matter, right? But I had some charts and they were great. What's the password for the Wi-Fi? What?
Agile 2015.
And it's this one, right? Okay, let's try. Will it work? Will it work? Will it? Will it? Will it? Will it? Oh, come on. All right, screw it. Thanks. So about a year ago, I was working at PayPal. Does anyone here work for any of the eBay companies? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So actually, working at PayPal wasn't so bad, to be honest with you. It was really slow and boring. You didn't have to worry about doing very much stuff. You could just pretty much go in at 9 o'clock and leave at 5 o'clock, and nobody said anything because everybody else was. But for me, this is sort of unacceptable. I was bored, and I was looking for a way out when a former coworker contacted me. He had left PayPal, and he said, "Hey, Tom, I'm going to this company. They need a lot of help." And I was like, "Oh, wow, I've never heard that before." Yeah, so they have this product, and there's like no test coverage. Every time they make any changes at all, it explodes, and they just introduce more and more bugs. Does this sound like a pattern? I'm pretty sure I've been hearing this everywhere for the last few days. So I said no. No, I refuse. Fuck you, Roman. I'm not going to do it. His name was Roman, by the way. So he kept digging at me. I kept refusing. One day I was doing a presentation at the Node.js conference in Meetup here in Berlin, presenting something. Doesn't matter what I was presenting. It was probably some open source library that I was writing. And the CEO came out to see my presentation. Basically, they were attempting to corner me into sort of submitting to joining their company. He bought me beers, and that was enough for me to consider talking to them a little bit more. So I'm kind of a prostitute in that way. You just give me beers or something, and I'm yours. Yeah, that's what I'm working for, right? Beer, yeah, it's okay. I still wasn't really ready to join the company, though. So he arranged a meeting with these three guys. I'm going to call them the technology troika, okay? They're the three senior guys of the company that have been there since the very beginning, and I think the company's about 15 years old at this point. They were the ones behind every single implementation of our product, and it doesn't matter what our product is because our product is the same as every other product. And they had found that every time they implemented it, they were implementing a massive monolith with almost zero test coverage. Yes, and as I was talking to them, what they said was, well, you know, when it was just us three guys working in a room, it didn't matter, right? We were constantly talking to each other, and so therefore, when a bug came up, we could just fix it, and that was okay. But then as we started hiring these fucking junior developers, they just came in and started destroying everything. And so basically they were shifting the blame onto other people, right? And I was thinking, okay, yeah, this also sounds very familiar to me. And as I was talking to them, I kept sort of grilling them on their architecture and what things they were willing to do to change it. And at some point, the CTO of the company basically turned to the CEO and says, listen, I don't know this guy. He could be a bum off the street. He was right, actually, I am. All the stuff that he has on GitHub, he probably didn't even write that. So apparently I had placed a lot of code on GitHub over the past several years, specifically to fake myself into this job, right? So they insulted me. I mean, they were literally sitting there insulting me, and that pissed me off, so I took the job. So who am I? I am a homeless guy. It's written on the card, right? Beyond what we heard before, I am a software troublemaker. I'm also an anarchist. So these guys hired me as a VP of engineering. What were they thinking? Like, why would you hire an anarchist to try to control an organization? It's not going to work. It does work, actually, and I'll explain that. And I like to fuck up companies, which we covered a little bit. But the story starts about 31 years ago. I was 12 years old, so do the math. I also coded quite a bit, and I also coded with 0 tests. And in that situation, the communication was great because I was just talking to myself, right? So there was no problem in fixing bugs and moving on. And the scale of the systems that I was designing, they were nothing. They were like little chat apps for BBSs and stuff like that. It wasn't like real code. And then eventually I got into the business world. And I was really lucky in the first couple of jobs that I had because I had awesome bosses that were complete mentors who forgave every single thing that I did wrong and really sort of put a lot of effort into developing me as a software developer and also instilling a lot of business sense in me as well. I've noticed a lot of developers, they don't give a fuck about the business. They don't care. They just want to be heads down and have nobody bother them about what they're implementing, and this sort of becomes a detachment disorder for them. But then I got into the actual business world. I went beyond these little startups, and I got into bigger companies with major dysfunctions, where how you present yourself is important. And so for about 5 years, I basically tried to get rid of my Boston accent. I had a thick Boston accent. Pakikan, Harvard Yard, all that stuff. My mother said it was perfect. And then I got rid of it over time because I thought, these people think I'm stupid. If I have this accent, they think I'm dumb. And for me, this was unacceptable because I wanted to be taken seriously. I don't want to be taken seriously anymore, actually. I've outgrown that. Now I just don't care, clearly. And from that point on, I've actually just wanted to get out of the business. It's the only thing I want to do is get out of the business. I've quit software development twice. One time to become a forklift driver at a warehouse. That was awesome. Because no matter what you do, you're only damaging like stuffed animals, which is what I was doing. I was just spearing stuffed animals and stuff like that, and like getting stoned in the back room and stuff. Really hard to get fired from those jobs, but if you get fired, it doesn't matter in either case because you're a forklift driver. And I also stopped for a little while to try to become a musician, and I'm horrible at that. But it's something that I really loved, and actually I would propose to you that you should always do what you love more than anything. And actually, I love software development. I hate doing it for companies. And I hate doing it for bad companies, and that's most companies. And this is part of the problem. This is why one of the things I want to do is fix companies. So that brings me to the job. I sort of told you a little bit about our product. It was a Java monolith, had a lot of problems. Let me show you a visual representation of that. Right? Here's the problem with something like this. People think that this is a joke. This is every Java monolith. And people like Martin Fowler will say, oh, no, you should always start with a monolith. It's totally okay. But like, what utopian universe does he live in where it's actually possible to create and maintain a Java monolith that doesn't go to hell within the first few sprints, right? No company cares to allow you to invest time in refactoring and in quality. They don't care. They want to release. Look at this shit. Okay. They want to release product. They want to get it out the door. They don't care. Yeah. They don't care that the stuff that you're producing fast is actually going to cause you to be incredibly slow later on. It doesn't even factor into their mental capacities. In our situation, we had 200,000 lines of Java code in one service. I think there was about 200,000. 200,000? Yes. More? Oh my. Yes. So there were places in that shit pile that had methods that were 500 lines long. More? My God. 500 lines. Yes, yeah, I know. Someone told me there was a PHP file that was actually one line of code, but it stretched off to like 5,000 columns. And I want to work for that company just because, Jesus. So some people might call this spaghetti. I think that's unfair to spaghetti. Because at least with spaghetti, you can put a fork in it and twist it a couple of times and actually extract out something that's good. In this case, and in probably most of your cases, you can't. You're left with sort of a decision, and usually the decision is, get rid of the shit. Just throw it away. But you can't, right? You can't do it, because then your boss will be like, oh, so what are you going to do? You're going to work in silence for 2 years, and then all of a sudden come out with exactly the same product? No, we have a better solution. And in this case, quite honestly, the only way to fix this, we were talking about, like, let's add some test coverage to it, because there were, like, 0 unit tests. Really, the only way to fix it, you'd probably be better off inventing a time machine, going back 10 years and just killing the original developers before they commit their crime. That's the only way out of that. So we chose to abandon this architecture. The monolith is something that will get you started, but it's just like clean code. You have to start with clean code at the beginning. You have to start with tests at the beginning. You have to refactor from day one. If you don't, you are going to find yourself in the mire and just dragging yourself through shit. For the rest of your life, you're going to hate your job. You're going to want to quit your job. Most people did. Not this place, but there's another reason for that, and I'll talk about it. So we chose to go away from the monolith. We chose to do something called a service-oriented architecture. Have you ever heard of that? They're calling it microservices these days. It's like when HTML wasn't hip anymore. They decided to, like, clean it up a little bit and call it XML. And then there were about 5 years of fucking hype around XML and what you could do with it. And I was part of that hype because I built a database for XML documents. It was stupid. I don't know why I did that, but I did. Shit, where was I? Microservices. So there's a lot of people who say microservices are dumb. To some degree, the hype is dumb, for sure. We go and we talk about how we're basically taking the complexity of your system and you're just shifting it into the operations sector. But that's actually not true. So a lot of the complexity that you're removing does shift into the operations area, your logging and stuff like that, but that's repeatable. That's stuff that you can create sort of like a boilerplate and just crank it out in duplication. And the actual code, the sort of the non-accidental code that you have to make, where the real complexity is, this becomes significantly easier. And we've been semi-successful at it so far. And I just, from an Agile point of view, I worked at Agile 42 for 3.5 years, and for some reason, the CEO of that company made me change the way I pronounce the word agile. I don't know why, because she mispronounced it, and so therefore I just pronounce it like her now. If you're developing software and you're doing it in smaller increments, why wouldn't you also think about your software the same way, right? Why would you create one massive heap of shit that you just keep adding onto over and over and over again? Why wouldn't you just implement features as completely independent features, the same way you write your stories completely independently? It doesn't make sense not to do that. And if you have the infrastructure to be able to pull it off, you should. So we also chose to abandon Java. It's not because Java sucks, even though it does. It's mainly because I felt when I came in that the developers would benefit from sort of jettisoning their mastery. So they'd established years of mastery in Java and in using, like, Java 2 EE stuff and JBoss and stuff like that, that they weren't thinking in any other fashion. If you gave them a problem to solve, they would start up a servlet container and implement a fucking servlet for it, even if it was like tailing a log, right? It's like the hammer, everything becomes a nail thing. The Java developers sort of get caught up in the Gang of Four book and implement it everywhere, and you end up with that thing that just ran off the stage. So I wanted them to walk away from their mastery. I wanted them to become novices again. Because if you're smart, if you're talented in software development, it doesn't matter what language you program in. For the most part, programming languages are like 95% exactly the same. The major differences are like runtime libraries and the packages that are available to you, what the community is like, and who's already done things that you could benefit from without having to write it yourself. So we went to Node.js. JavaScript also sucks. I don't know. It's weird. We went from one sucky language to another sucky language, but it wasn't to say that JavaScript was better. It was really to break the mastery. And one of the constraints, and it's not even a constraint. It's sort of an idea that I gave the developers was, I don't even care what you program this stuff in. To be honest, you could do it in Haskell. You can do it in fucking Erlang, Perl. I don't care. Maybe not PHP, but you can do it however you want. Just make sure it's decoupled and it's small, and it has to talk to the message queue. That's it, really. As long as it's small, it doesn't matter because this is an iteration, right? So if the service is really small, we decide it's broken, we can completely rewrite it from scratch in a couple of days. Or if we need to iterate on it, we don't modify it, just rewrite it. Because actually, it probably takes less time to rewrite it than to actually implement it from scratch, or not even implement it from scratch or modify it. In my mind, I thought that change was really our salvation, because if we'd kept going with doing the same thing over and over again, and these guys they'd implemented the same system at least 3 times, we would just implement the same system a 4th time. And I didn't want to do that. Plus, I didn't want to program in Java either. It was selfish. I was totally selfish. So, writing tests, and this is where I wish I had some slides, because I got some stuff. Give me one moment. The internet never worked, though, so.
Seems to be working now.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh, let's try it.
By the Dorint Hotel.
Dorint Hotel?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm slow. The good thing with the delays is that I really only had about 10 minutes of material anyway. So, you just bear with me. If you have any questions in the meantime, that'd be good, too. It's not responding. Oh, wait, it says I'm on there. Is there even a password? It's just letting me on. Or is it a portal?
There's a portal. Choose conference.
Okay.
And the same password as Agile.
Blah.com. I need something where DNS hasn't already given me an IP address, right? So hello.com. Someplace I never go. Microsoft.com. Nope. Not working. That's okay. So I'm going to talk about tests anyway. This is the part of the talk where I piss you off, by the way, if I haven't already. So writing tests is stupid. Sorry, it is. If you think about it, from a lean point of view, tests do not contribute to the value that's delivered to the customer. They aren't delivered to the customer. In fact, the source code these days isn't even delivered to the customer, especially if you're doing like web apps, right? So from that point of view, code is also waste. You should basically eliminate all your code and all your tests, and then you would have the perfect product. But you have to write a piece of software, right? It has to be written in code, most likely. There have been people who've tried to create like magical tools where you can just sort of drag and drop software into existence. That was always pretty funny to me. Sun tried to do it when they invented Java. They had this little thing where you created Java beans and you connected them with wires and shit and hoped that it would work. At the end, it didn't. It actually took like 5 hours to do something you could do in about 5 lines of code in 5 minutes. So basically, what I'm saying is that this is technically waste. We should seek to remove it in as much as possible. I'm not saying we can. I'm saying we should seek to. And that means try somehow. I don't know. Maybe we should start writing perfect code in the first place to eliminate the need to create tests. That would go a long way toward making tests even more useless. You'll never remove the need for an actual human being, because obviously there are things that automated tests could never really test, like, is this even the right thing in the first place, right? Because the programmer will just create a bunch of assertions and shit, and it'll just say, yes, that's exactly how I meant to implement it in the first place. And come out true, and you have no idea that the software is just doing the entirely wrong thing to begin with. It's doing it correctly, but it's wrong. And so therefore you need people to do that stuff. So I'm going to share a little story. Has anyone ever been to Arizona? Were you there for vacation? Okay, so did you go to the Grand Canyon? I'm not going to talk about the Grand Canyon. I'm just kidding. There's a place in Arizona. It's southeast of Phoenix, almost toward Tucson. It's called Oracle. It's a little town called Oracle, Arizona. It has nothing to do with a database company. In fact, I don't even think they know what a database is, just like the company Oracle. They're the site of an experiment. Hold on, I have to drink. They built a completely sealed environment called Biosphere 2. What Biosphere 2 does is it tries to simulate the way that Earth operates, but inside of a container. Like, they created like a tundra and a rainforest and stuff like that, and they planted all these trees and shit. And then they were going to go inside of the container and live there for 2 years to see if they could actually do it. Part of the way through, they were noticing that the trees were drooping, and they couldn't understand why. They were basically, it's like, what's with the droopy trees? I thought we did this right. It turns out that there was no wind inside of Biosphere 2. Wind is a stressor, right? When a tree gets hit by wind, it actually builds up something called stress wood. It's almost like scar tissue. And that stress wood actually makes the tree strong. You have to actually attack a tree to make it strong, otherwise it's going to fall over. This is the same way, like, where if I sort of, sit on my ass all day and I get up, I fall over because I really wasn't stressing myself in any way, shape, or form. So the funny thing about that is, yes, okay, people are arrogant and stupid, and they didn't even think that wind might be necessary. But Mike, who left, told me that there was an exactly identical project in England called the Eden Project, and they had the same problem. So 2 separate, isolated groups of people were stupid in exactly the same way. And what that means is that you can't trust tests, and you can't trust code, because usually people are thinking the same way, and I know testers like to think they have a completely different mindset than programmers. They don't. We're different, we work differently. No, you don't. You write code, or you automate things in the same exact fashion. You're likely to overlook things. And so, yeah, Biosphere 2. Okay. I had an awesome diagram for coverage because I was going to complain about test coverage, right? Everybody is really like up in arms about test coverage. They're like, oh, test coverage. You have to have 100% across the board. Statements, branches, lines. This is the only way to guarantee quality. That's bullshit. Sorry, it's bullshit. And here's why. 100% code coverage does not imply 100% state coverage. If you have a program that's even minorly complex, you will never cover the possible states that program can be in. So using 100% code coverage as a metric really does a disservice to your developers. The only thing it does is it tends to be a source of shaming and blame and violence, leverage toward your engineers. And this is not the way to move forward. What you really should be instilling in them is a sense of caring about the code that they write, spending more time writing the code, because quite honestly, developers will cheat. I cheat, okay? So I have a project, I wrote a language called Fate. Doesn't matter, you're not gonna use it ever, it makes no difference. But in my test suite, I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna just write the tests in the language itself and then exercise those tests to cover all of the lower level mechanisms of the language. This resulted in 2 things. It resulted in tests that were incredibly slow. So they're not unit tests anymore. They're practically integration tests. And it also resulted in me not being able to find bugs when they cropped up, because now you're abstracted from actually the very lowest level units of the system. It's not unit tests at that point, right? But I was getting 100% code coverage. I won. Right? Until I had a bug, and then I was fucked. I was totally fucked, because now, like, if my AST, abstract syntax tree, was screwed up in some way, I had no way to track back and figure out why that occurred. because it was exposing itself as part of the language itself. There was no really sourcing back to the origin. And I've done it in other places too, like where I wrote a promises library once. And if you've ever used promises, there's a method called sum, which basically says, okay, well, I have all these promises, and I only want 2 of them. I don't care which ones. That passed the tests. I had 100% test coverage. I implemented it wrong. I didn't follow the spec, so it behaved completely incorrectly. But it was covered, so, I win. And if I'm cheating myself and nobody is pressuring me, what do you think your engineers are doing when you're pressuring them? They're totally cheating. They're looking for any way to get coverage just so you shut up and leave them alone, right? And this is not the way to proceed. So wait, what do I got next? Yeah, see, I was going to demo an awesome chart. I could do a flip chart, but you won't see it, so I'm not going to bother. So yeah, start caring. And you should probably program in Haskell. Because, it's immutable. So, you can't screw anything up, really, right? No one ever writes bugs in Haskell. Now, I'm just going after the functional people at this point because I think they're kind of dickish and arrogant. So the next thing, I started to allude to it with the Biosphere 2 thing, is fragility. Systems, we try to write systems that are bulletproof, and this is actually sort of doing us a disservice. We think that if we create a system that is completely resilient to all potential failures that we can imagine, that we're better off when it goes into production. The problem with that is that most of the failures that occur are the ones we didn't imagine, right? And now you have a huge monolith that when something does go wrong, you're fucked. You're totally fucked. You have no idea how it happened. You have no easy or fast way to recover from it, especially with JBoss. It takes like 15 minutes to start up a JBoss instance. So like, even if you made the modification and you squeeze things through your continuous integration pipeline and then you wanted to restart JBoss, that's a good like 17 hours, right? Basically. So what I'm basically saying is, with the microservices play, we didn't completely eliminate that, but we really staved off a lot of problems. And one of the other constraints that I try to push on the developers is, if you're going to have, if there are going to be problems in your software, don't try to recover from them. Just explode. Throw an exception. Have the process completely explode, and create logs. Heavily log your system. Anything that occurs, log it, and then monitor your logs heavily. This is really the way toward true quality, because you actually will be able to recover from things, because you're finding out what the system is doing that you didn't expect it to do, and it's telling you that it's happening in the most horrible, horrible way. And when a baby cries in the most horrible, horrible way, what do? You let it cry? Scientists say you're not supposed to do that. That's not true either. Go immediately and just hit them in the face. I'm sorry, that's wrong. That was just bad of me. I'm horrible. Another thing, if you're programmers, and I'm a programmer mainly, so this is a programming hint. Don't catch exceptions. The word exception means that it's exceptional. Right? I see a lot of programmers writing code where they're using exceptions as an up-the-stack messaging system. This is stupid. First of all, creating the frame for being able to have it go back up is massive overhead. Oh, look, that's me. And really, it's just bad programming practice, right? So don't do it. Let the stack basically go up and explode your entire process. Unless you're in Java, and then you have no choice, because a Java VM is just massive. And you're getting the point here. You should just quit using Java, right? Yeah, sorry. And finally, I'm gonna get into how I manage. That was the sort of the third section. I've got 15 minutes left. I think I can cover this. Yeah. All right. So the slide was how to make friends and influence people. These guys hired me as their vice president of engineering. I immediately came in, and the way that I managed was to not manage at all. They hired an anarchist. What were they thinking? So basically, what I did was I gave every single developer trust, inherent, immediate, implicit trust. because I've known a lot of developers, and I don't think I've ever met a developer who said, you know what, I like to write shitty code. I never met that person. And if I met that person, I'd probably say, maybe this isn't your line of work. Maybe you should do something else. And if you assume that developers want to write good code and they want to create something that they're proud of, why not trust them to find the right way to do it? And you can, of course, encourage them and give them hints and stuff like that. This was completely at odds with the way the company had been operating for the last 10 years. Basically, the way it worked was if somebody fucked up, they would hear about it immediately, probably in a meeting in front of all of their peers. They would be told, you're a horrible person because you broke the build, or your tests are shit, or you didn't write tests at all, which is basically, how could you be mad at that? Nobody was writing tests. And people were shamed and hurt and blamed amongst their peers. And from that point, let's talk about it. What happens with developers when this happens? I'll go sort of into the way that I was raised. I was pretty much beaten horribly by my dad. He was a piece of shit. I love him now, but like when I was a kid, he was terrible. And when this happens, as a person, you shut down. Like you recede into a shell where you don't want to leave or do anything that might upset the flow. And if you treat your developers like shit when they do something wrong, exactly the same thing is going to happen. When somebody does something wrong, you don't celebrate it, but help them. Help them get better. Help them learn from the mistake instead of like treating them like garbage. The other thing I did was I really encouraged them to slow down. This company was sort of acting like it had no future, like they had to crank out all of these features really fast. It had to be done now, fast, fast, fast. The motto of the company is even, what is it? It's draw it, sell it, make it. That's the wrong order, right? So you don't sell it and then make it. And if you want to qualify it, it should have been draw it, sell it, make it fast, because we already are taking orders for this and it's going to be delivered. What that does is it creates a sense of urgency where developers are now feeling highly pressured to perform. And what happens when that occurs? Well, they start producing shit, of course. So I encourage people to slow down. I encourage them to stop committing to so much, because this is another thing. Even yesterday, there was a planning that I wasn't there because I was here, and the CEO sat in on it, and the developers had committed to something like 9 stories or something like that. And the CEO was like, well, why can't you commit to more? And this is the worst possible thing. And organizations who say, I'm committed to agile testing and agile development and the whole Scrum thing, I'm totally in. I buy in on it. Yeah, they're usually lying, unfortunately. I'm almost of the opinion that the only companies that really can afford to say that they really buy into it are the ones just starting out, because they have nothing else invested already, so they can do it, or the ones that are so huge that the investment in the transformation is not going to hurt them very much. They're willing to accept it. They'll just have to get rid of their middle management, because usually the middle management's like the permafrost layer of a company, where they refuse to change because they've been there forever and they want to die there. But they should die somewhere else. So yeah, essentially I wanted the developers to walk before they run. We were changing everything. It wasn't like we were just changing little things. We were rocking their entire world in one day. And the only way to start over is to start from scratch and to sort of crawl and then walk and then run. And eventually you get there. So this sort of goes into the fast as an obsession. A lot of companies are really into fast. What if somebody came up to you and says, hey, I know how you can be twice as productive in your work. What would you say about that? Oh, well. Oh, well. Yeah. Yeah, I would say, oh, well, do I get paid twice as much? They were like, oh, no. We aren't even going to keep up with the cost of living. Sorry. And then I'll say, well, can I work half as much? And they're like, no, you probably won't even get vacation. This is our culture now, and it's weird because I think about my grandfather. When he was working, he would come home at the end of the day, And he made enough money to actually support a family of like 3 kids and his wife. His wife didn't have to work because those were the conditions of the time. And now it seems like companies are so, what's going on here? That's great. Sorry. I don't have ADHD, but I think that's kind of cool. And so he worked less. And you know what? The economies grew. Everything was okay, other than like wars and shit, which is always a problem. And all of a sudden, sometime in the 80s, everybody thought, hey, let's crank shit out fast. We're not going to like pay you anything. And the good thing is we're engineers, so we get paid a lot. Well, not all of us. And testers get paid less, I'm sorry. That's not my fault. That's the industry, and you should complain about it. But we're not hurting. Like my grandfather worked factory work, and he did okay. The thing I'm seeing, though, is that Agile, it's not necessarily helping us. And I'm also seeing coaches and trainers who don't really believe in it. They're just sort of trying to make a buck off of it. And this is a problem for me. I worked with some really good coaches who really believe it and really love what they're doing and really want to transform companies for the sake of actually helping people. But more often than not, I'm seeing people getting into the game to just come in and say, oh yeah, I taught them how to do a stand-up and how to do TDD, where's my paycheck? Without actually investigating the problems, the dysfunctions of a company from the top down. And let me tell you something. If you're ever talking to someone and they say, oh yeah, we have a lot of problems at our company, and you say, oh, well, I have some solutions, like I have some suggestions, and they say something like, oh, well, our company's unique, then you can say, oh, really, does your company not have people in it? Because every single company has exactly the same problems, and they almost all originate from the top, and they cascade down. And so when, for example, Mike was talking yesterday, and one of the things that he and I have talked about a bit is how do you change that from the bottom up? I'm not going to get into it. You should have attended the tutorial. That's your fault. But me personally, I've tried to do it for years, and I've never actually been fired for it, but I've pissed a lot of people off. And I don't know where I was going with that. I'm all over the place. If I had slides, it'd be better, but it's okay. But generally, they want the hyper-productive team, the CEOs. Oh, I've heard about this hyper-productive team. When am I going to get it? 6 months? I'm like, you're crazy. It's not going to happen. 6 months? No. Years? Maybe never. Probably never. I've only been on one hyper-productive team. I think it's mainly a myth. And the only reason it was hyper-productive is because there were 2 people in it. As soon as you add another person, it just goes to shit, right? As soon as you have more lines of communication, you have this full crossover, the communication becomes so bad that hyper-productivity is almost impossible. And so they just want fast. They don't care what the human cost is in doing it. They will even ask you to work overtime. But we've committed to these stories. We know we're going to get them done. Our velocity looks pretty good. The burn down's okay. No, we really think you should work overtime to get this done faster so that you can pull more stories into the sprint at the end. So what happens? What happens when you consume things too fast? You choke and you die. And your development team is going to do that as well. If you're not the person at the bottom yelling up saying, stop this shit right now. Where's the girl who said she wanted to fuck up her company? She should be doing that. Yeah, do that. I don't know what you're doing at your company, but it doesn't matter. Just say, stop this shit now, please. So yeah, I was talking about fear a little bit. I already talked about that. I talked a little bit about shame. As developers, we're so used to being shamed and blamed for things that it's even sort of invaded like our nomenclature. Like, what's the command in Git to find out who committed a specific line? It's fucking blame. Why? Why are you blaming? It's just a line of code. Do you think that one line of code is really going to make the difference between life or death? Well, maybe. It depends. Like if it's a car, yeah. Toyota probably could have used the git blame functionality. But there's this concept of shame and fear and blame and violence that humans really like to just exert on everybody because they know it's effective. Like violence is totally useful in making people do what you want them to do. And we feel it like every day, right? So The United States did a great job of that after 9/11. I don't know if you know that. Like they used it to basically just get rid of all privacy and freedom whatsoever in the country. Ideologues do this really well, not just religious people, but mostly just all ideologues. But your bosses do it too. They hold your salary hostage over your head to basically make you do things that you wouldn't otherwise do as a reasonable person. And it's mainly because in our society we reward it. Yeah, there's the get thing. So what do we do? Well, how about we just stop? Stop blaming people. Stop shaming them. Stop scolding them. Stop humiliating them. Stop making yourself feel better just so that you can debase or degrade somebody else in the process. And stop allowing fear to drive you. So in this company, fear was prevalent everywhere. Like the developers were afraid to make decisions because they knew they would be beaten down if they made the wrong ones. This is pretty much, I don't know if it's like this in your companies. I wish it weren't, but it probably is, right? It's pretty much, it's globally happening. And it drives you like to these inhumane acts. And start embracing change. The great thing about just stopping what you're doing and starting up from scratch and changing everything that you're doing is that when you're a novice, the whole world is brand new to you. And this discovery is probably one of the most amazing things that you can experience. So if you keep doing it over and over and over again, you feel like you have a new career every couple of years. I feel bad for like COBOL programmers and Java programmers, right? Because I programmed in Java for like 14 years, and I don't think I learned a fucking thing after like the second year. So for most of that time, I was stagnant and useless. Like I could implement algorithms and blah, 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 but it was the same crap over and over and over again, and I felt like I should just quit because this is useless. I'm like a completely useless person inside of these cogs and wheels and sprockets and shit. I'm sorry. I wish I had slides. And then help people. The people that you work with, help them be better than you would like to be yourself. Because it comes back in spades. You'll be rewarded by, don't care about your boss. Fuck your boss. Not literally. Say fuck you, boss. Right? Worry about the people that you work with, your peers and the people below you, because in the end, those are the ones who are going to save you, right? Your boss doesn't care. You're replaceable to them. I'm horrible. I'm a horrible, horrible person. And so there's an epilogue. The epilogue is this. Agile coaches, sorry. What's the first value of the Agile Manifesto? Nope. Wrong. Individuals. But they are people, aren't they? Yes, they are. I just want to be, I wanted to shame you. I'm sorry, Gita. Yes, so because it's the very first value, it's exactly the very first word, your duty is to people. To people. Over the process, over the paycheck, over anything. If you go into an organization and you see that the organization's interests are solely to make the developers faster, tell them that you need to transform the entire organization or you're gone. Don't do it just to give them practices. Don't do it just to increase their velocity by 12 points. This is not the right way to approach your job. I'm not trying to tell you to do your job certain ways. I'm saying that value this thing because people are far more important than the money in your pocket. You might be out of business in a few years when I create my own manifesto and stuff like that. So, and once I'm, running my own manifestos, blank alliance, and I'm deciding who's certified or not, I might decide I don't want to certify you guys. Just saying. I'm a dick. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's it. I got nothing else. I had an awesome graph, but and I had some code. I was going to show you code, but it's okay. Oh, wow. I'm almost done. Questions?
Thanks so much.
Wait, I had another thing. I didn't prepare anything. This was completely improvised. Sorry.
Questions? Okay, already one there. Whoa.
You're not supposed to ask questions.
Well, the first one. The guy who wants to work for me.
by changing to microservices, aren't you bringing the inherent complexity in the monolith in the open and show it, make it transparent?
Yes and no. I mean, so the way that we approach it, and I think this is the best way for most companies to approach it is, you shouldn't re-architect a system from scratch and in isolation. So our goal was to essentially re-implement pieces of it at a time, and basically extract functionality from the original system and re-implement it, and then hook everything up to the message queue. One of the benefits of using a message queue in general, other than its horrible speed, is that once you decouple these services, you can now just treat the content that's passing back and forth as just sort of arbitrary content rather than tightly coupled content between a client and a server, right? So one of the things we've done is we do have RPC communications between them, but we are also now able to leverage the fact that anyone can consume messages that are pushed into the message queue, and we can even sort of start to parallelize even more effectively than we had before. So this is one of the benefits. I mean, the complexity itself, it doesn't make itself out in the open. Really, a message queue is very flat. You just have sort of topics, and you can arrange your topics hierarchically if you want, but it doesn't have to be overly complex at all.
Hi, thanks for the provoking talk. I like that you said something. You were programming in Java for 14 years, but after 2 years you stopped learning any new stuff.
Yeah.
So why, I assume that you eventually moved to another language. So why did it took you so long to quit the Java?
Yep.
And do you have any kind of epilogue and kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I would say I felt the same way that a lot of the developers felt at my current company. I felt like I was in a comfort zone, right? I was, at least, I was afraid of the unknown, and I didn't want to venture out into it, right? Because the results might be catastrophic. And so most people would basically just sit on their island if presented this option, and they shouldn't. Right, the worst possible thing that could have happened for me was, well, I just go back to being a Java programmer, right? But I wasn't even thinking like that. I was sort of thinking in the shell-shocked fashion that a lot of people tend to think about their careers and the work that they do. So after that, I went and I did Python programming for a few years. I kind of miss Python programming, but it is what it is. And now Node.js stuff. I tend to try to learn a lot of different languages. And in fact, I would suggest that anyone does that. Like, don't just concentrate on the language that you're implementing things in at work. Learn something that's completely different, because yes, Java has a really big foothold on the industry still. I don't know if it's the #1 language on GitHub, but it's up at the top. I think JavaScript might be bigger at this point, but that's only because there's so much crap JavaScript out there. And in that case, that skill is still going to be useful. Like, for example, in maybe 20 years, there might be another like Y2K bug, and all the Java developers need to come out of the woodwork to fix something. I don't know, And in that case, your skills will be highly useful. Sure.
We already had this discussion, but I would like to return for a moment. So your opinion is to let go all of the coverage metrics?
No. I would say that I don't believe in hard and fast metrics as a way to determine whether or not success has been achieved, right? As soon as you say, oh, well, they made their 100% test coverage, that implies they're done. That implies they don't have to even put more thought into the code that they write, right? And so you'll find the shortest and least resistant route in order to achieve that 100% test coverage. And if you do that, you're going to miss a lot of important things, like just simple logic errors, right? And depending on how complex your code is, if you have like if statements everywhere, like you might literally have coverage for all of those if branches, but you don't necessarily have all of the coverage for the potential states that could result from those if branches and the mutations that are happening therein. And so in that case, you really just have to start caring about your work. But the only way you can really care about your work is if your boss gets off your back and stops telling you to go fast. Fast will eventually come. It's just a matter of like, we really have to get into the cadence of really creating a quality piece of software first and doing it right. And then eventually we'll build up to something where we're delivering things pretty quickly. But if you have someone constantly riding you, you're just going to produce garbage. I mean, even if it's garbage with 100% test coverage. And I'd rather not ever see a developer in that situation.
So you said that writing tests is stupid from a lean point of view because it doesn't deliver any value to your customer.
Well, no, it delivers the quality. But
Right, so I wanted to ask if this is your anarchist part of nature or there's something more to that?
no, generally, I know that, for example, a customer, if you ever have a conversation with a customer and you say, yeah, man, we have like 90% test coverage on this piece, they're like, I don't care. Does it work? That's what they care about, right? As long as it works. They don't care how you achieved the quality. Right? So you do have to build quality in. This is lean. It's part of the whole lean philosophy. But how you achieve the quality totally depends on the best and least wasteful route to achieving that quality. And test coverage is not necessarily the best way to achieve it in all cases. And one of the graphs I was going to show is the fact that depending on the architecture you use, the amount of effort required to create test coverage will either be almost infinitely hard to get up to 100% because you just got shit like lines of code all over the place and code paths that just don't end, or it could be almost like linear and effortless. But this really depends on the way that you've architected your code. And for us, microservices has proven to be actually a really good route to that. So like the services that we've written, we've got about 12 services at this point, I think, 10, 12. I think almost all of them are like somewhere 90 to 100% test coverage, not that that matters. But the amount of effort that went into achieving that test coverage is far, far easier than if we were trying to cover the monolith. The monolith, I think, had basically 0, and they were trying to make up for it with like integration level testing, like higher level testing, which of course doesn't cover anything, right? It basically covers a tiny little sliver of the base, and you really can't have any certainty about your software at that point. But yeah, that's it. I rambled on a little bit. Sorry.
Okay,
More questions? Okay. Thanks so much.
There's a guy there.
No, one more. Okay.
So why did you come back to software testing after twice trying, I would say, an alternative way of living? And as far as an anarchist, how does that fit into the very corporate world of IT development?
Okay, so I'm not actually in test. I mean, I'm sort of a VP of engineering, so I kind of have to care about it. And I can instruct people or encourage them to do certain things. From that point of view, I have an inherent interest in making sure there's high quality. But again, as an anarchist, I think that people can be trusted to find their own path toward achieving the goals that you sort of establish as a group. And as far as IT and anarchism go, I think that they're like the perfect pair, honestly. And this whole Agile thing is almost like an inverted command and control system where a Scrum Master, for example, is not a leader. He's a servant leader, right? He's a person who is just there, and yes, they might coach and stuff like that, but his only job is to help everybody else be better. And so from that point of view, it's exactly the same. There you go.
More questions? Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you.